So welcome back, everybody. I'm probably there are a lot of people still connected, but let's start this third session of the eYCN at ECC webinars. It's really a great pleasure to host this session on career development workshop, and I'm really happy and glad to have Francesco Ricci, Ulrich Grant, and Nessa Carson presenting their experience and their different free profiles to our community. We have Francesco, which is a professor in the University of Rome, and is really an example of great CV in terms of academic CV, since he was awarded with the Marie Curie, with the ERC starting grant, and also the consolidator. And he will give some inputs on that regard. Then we will pass by to Ulrich Grant, the CEO of Dynamic Biosensor, that from the academia funded his own biotech startup, and is a great example of how you can really bring your ideas in a real company. And then Nessa, that she is a young chemist in Syngenta. So without losing so much more time, I will start with the first speaker, Francesco. I will really welcome to present your presentation, and please don't forget to write your question on the QA. And we will leave some minutes after the presentation of Francesco. After that, I think that Francesco, you can start. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Alicia of the European Young Chemistry Network for organizing this session. And for inviting me to give this talk. So as Alicia was saying, I will talk about academic career, and I will talk about my personal experience. First of all, I just want to give a brief introduction of what we do in our group. I'm a professor at the University of Rome. I work in the field of DNA nanotechnology. Where we use the synthetic DNA as an engineering material. So we design and develop input-responsive nanoswitches and nanomachines made of synthetic DNA that can be used for different applications, including diagnostic and clinical applications. This is my academic career in brief. Obviously, just some highlights. I did my master thesis and PhD at the chemistry department of the University of Rome, working on electrochemical sensors and biosensors. Then I did a postdoc period at the University of California, Santa Barbara. After that, I got a Marie Curie outgoing fellowship, also to work in Santa Barbara. And then when I got back, I won a ERC starting grant in 2014, which allowed me to start my own research group. And with that, I got an associate professorship position. When the starting grant was finished, I was lucky enough to get a consolidated grant, and last year I was promoted to full professor. Today I will try to give you some tips on academic career, which, as I will show, is not too different from a professional football player career. Obviously, there are big differences, especially in terms of salary, but there are also some common features. Before going into this, one very big disclaimer: all these tips and advices are based on my personal experience, so this is very subjective. There are many variables and that cannot be considered and summarized in 15 minutes. So don't take any of these as golden rules, but just as advices from my personal experience. So first of all, the academic career for me started with my master thesis and obviously PhD. And this is the very first step, and it's extremely important. Sometimes this is underestimated, but it's where it all starts. So it's extremely important to find the right team where you do your PhD. So you are young, you are inexperienced, so you should find a team or a group that valorizes young players. You should really find a team where you can play, and that don't let young players sit in the bench, and where you can grow. This is during PhD is extremely important. It's also important to find a team where you have resources. So as I will show later, money is actually important in research. And so to choose the best group, you should also look at the track record. Where are now previous players? What did they achieve? And this will help you to find the right lab. Obviously, I'm not saying that you should look into this, only these aspects. You should do what you like to do, and so you should find a lab that does research in the field that you want to pursue. But also these aspects should be considered. Just an extra tip, you can look for a PhD position in the frame of ITN proposals. These are usually carried out by very good research groups that allow you to have good collaborations also in Europe. During the PhD, so this is also extremely important. An academic career is usually based on your track record. For a striker, you look at the goals for each season, and maybe it's a little bit sad, but it's also true that you have to publish. And it's not just about the number of papers, but it's more about the quality of papers. So you should publish in good journals and good papers. Especially in chemistry, the author's order is important. So during your PhD, you should try to publish as first author. It's not just about papers, obviously. You should also look for fellowships, awards, international experience, collaborations. So everything makes for a good CV. So all these aspects and many more. Then after the PhD, you should try to change. This is not always true in football. So there are very good careers in a single team, but in research and science, usually change is good. So you should slightly maybe change research field. The choice of the postdoc group is also extremely important, and you can follow the same rules for PhD team. It's extremely important to demonstrate productivity in a different environment, so that you can show that by changing environment you can keep a good track record. It's very important to learn new things, to learn new ways of doing research. Every lab has a different way of writing papers, for example, and of doing research, and this is very good for your growth. And usually for European researchers, it's good to go to USA. Then maybe after a first period of postdoc, it would be good to go towards independence, and then you should look for fellowships that are available for postdoc periods. And obviously, Marie Curie individual fellowships are the most prestigious in Europe, but there are many others, national and international postdoc fellowships. And these fellowships could be really a turning point for an academic career. Extra bonus for a Marie Curie fellowship is the good salary, especially compared to other European countries where salaries are usually not very high. Very briefly, this was my personal experience with the Mercury Fellowship. I went to University of Santa Barbara, California, where I started working with DNA-based sensors. Again, an extra tip is to find a nice place where you want to do your fellowship. This really, can help. It was not really, a linear process. So this is my submission history. I first submitted my proposal in 2009. I got quite a low score, actually. Many weaknesses were identified by the evaluators, and so the proposal was rejected. In next year, I applied again. I improved my proposal, also following the evaluators' comments. I got, much lower weaknesses, a much higher score, but was rejected again. And actually, it was the first in the reserve list, so it was really frustrating. So I applied next year again, so this time I got actually a lower score, slightly lower than previous year, but this year was enough to get the fellowship. So lesson learned for me was that it's good to never give up. European community wants to see you suffer a little bit, rejection is part of the game. This is also extremely important to learn as soon as possible. This is true for papers, but also for grant applications. Now I'm on the other side, so my experience as a host of Mercury Fellows was actually very successful. These are the fellows, the global fellows that visit our lab in the last years. Maybe some of you can be the next one. Deadline is actually very close, but if you are interested, you can send me an email. And then, after a postdoc period, maybe a fellowship, it's time to start your own team. And again, money is not everything. Also in football, it's not just about how much money you spend to win a game, but research needs money. So there are many grants that are available for young researchers. Obviously, ERC starting grant is the most prestigious in Europe. I know that there will be a session, I think, on ERC starting grant, and maybe also on Mercury proposals. So I will not go too much into details on this, but it's important to understand that ERCs and other, grant agencies don't want to take any risk. So they will give the grant to researchers that have an excellent CV, a good track record, that have proved the ability to manage a team and to get results during a project. So again, this was my personal experience with the ERC. I first submitted the proposal, the first proposal in 2012. It passed the first phase, so I went to Brussels for the interview, which went really well. So I was really happy. But then after 1 month, I received the email saying that the proposal was rejected. So as you can imagine, this was really frustrating. But then again, this is part of the game. So next year, I could apply again, and I did many things to improve my proposal. I changed panel. I improved my CV, obviously, because I had more publications. I also had some small independent grants, and I improved the proposal and the project idea. And I made clear that this was, my project, which is important for an ERC starting grant. And again, I passed the second phase. I went to Brussels for the interview. The interview was slightly worse, actually, than the year before. So I was not so confident, but this time I got the grant. So in this case, I had 9 evaluators. So 7 were positive, one was quite positive, and 1 was slightly positive. Again, some lesson learned, again, from my personal experience. Publications are very important. Obviously, if you have natural science, you are halfway there. But this is very difficult, and I had no natural science papers, especially for chemists. This is not with high impact multidisciplinary chemistry journals like JAX and Gelante or Chem. For ERC, it's better to have one big paper as first author than 5, 6, average impact papers, and it's very important to publish without your boss or your PhD supervisor. Again, to publish as first author or corresponding author, and to publish in high impact factor journals. It's important also to demonstrate that you can manage a project. This is very difficult for very young researchers, but there are small grants, maybe at national level, that can be focused, and even small personal budget can demonstrate that you can run a project. And to me, I think it's also important to demonstrate experience abroad. So again, to demonstrate that you can achieve results in a different environment. That's about it. I just want to give some extra tips, again based on my personal experience. I think it's in academia. I mean, this is true everywhere, but in academia even more. Lies in research have very short legs. So it's important to have a good work and research ethics. The other thing I learned is that the academic community is a very small world, and the sooner you learn this, the better it is, I think. It's important to do your share in the community, your research field, so review papers, grants, get involved in education and any other of this activity. And then the other thing I see some PhD students that struggle with is organization of the work time, and setting reasonable but good goals. And this maybe sound stupid, but answer emails in a reasonable time. This is also extremely important, especially if you want to establish collaboration and run a project with other partners. The last thing I want to say is obviously good luck to all of you in your career. This is also sometimes underestimated, but you need a lot of luck, and I reckon I had luck with some of my achievements, and you will also see that for going from the submission of a paper to the submission of a grant proposal, luck plays an important role. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will be happy to answer any question you might have.
Thanks, Francesco. Thanks a lot for this very interesting overview about your profile and your career. I think that we learned that we don't have to give up and never. There are some questions. One is related to the corresponding authors, and they ask because not in all the groups is so easy to ask to be corresponding authors. And if you have some comments or a hint to give in case you have a boss that is not so willing to give you this opportunity, how the student can approach him and say, look, maybe we can find a compromise.
Yeah, I think this is a good question. I think as a PhD student, it's not reasonable to have to be a corresponding author. So this is usually as a postdoc, maybe senior postdoc, especially if you have your own fellowship. This could be something that you can really convince your supervisor to do. Maybe one compromise could be to have a co-corresponding author, which is something that many journals allow. So not just one corresponding author, but two corresponding authors, which could already be a very good thing.
One question related to this one is how can you publish without your boss if you use their laboratory and researchers when you are a postdoc?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sorry, I think what I meant was more publish without your PhD supervisor. So this is important for ERC starting grant. So obviously, when you are doing your PhD, you will have to publish with your PhD supervisor. But then, when you do your postdoc, usually in a different lab, but then you should publish without your PhD supervisor. This is what I meant. Sorry. So when I say boss, is more PhD supervisor.
Yeah, and another question is how is like let's say the networking part? How was important? How much was important in your career development? The people that you met, the congress, and all this part.
Yeah, I think I realized very late that is actually important. I thought that participating to conferences was more a waste of time because you can look at research carried out in papers, but actually the networking part is also important. And as I said, the academic community is a very small world, so you want to really, know people that will review your papers, that review your grant proposal. They will at least know who you are, and they can put a face on the name, and that could be important.
Thanks, Francesco. I think that is really an important message because, as you say, a lot of researchers, like young researchers, they think that in the lab, staying in the lab is enough, but networking is definitely important. Yeah. And this is a good hint to say, please come in Lisbon in 2 years. We will wait you there to the ECC Congress. Just one last short one is were you inspired by colleagues or supervisors' academic career? What was your inspiration to try again and again?
Say it again. Sorry, what was my inspiration?
Yeah, which was your inspiration? A colleague, a supervisor, or what brings you to retry it again and again?
Okay. No, actually, neither of these. It was more, I'm a stubborn person, so it was more, a sort of personal challenge, and I thought that the proposal could be improved, so why not? And obviously, again, I was lucky enough that I had the opportunity to, to resubmit the proposal, both for the Mercury and the ERC starting grant. Sometimes this is not possible.
Thanks, Francesco. I think that for the sake of time, we need to move on to the next speaker, but I think it was super nice to have your testimony. Thanks a lot. Okay.
Thank you.
So let me present the next speaker is Ulrich Grant. He grew up in Austria, studied physics at the TU Graz in Austria, and came to Munich for the PhD in nanobiotechnology. And then has done a postdoc at Fujitsu, Japan, and the TU Munich, and then became an independent group leader at the Institute of Advanced Studies at the TU in nanobiotech. In 2012, he co-founded the Dynamic Biosensor, and now he's the CEO of this company. So I please welcome on the, let's say, web floor to present your
Thank you, Alice, very much for the kind. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I hope you can hear me well. Yeah. I hope.
Yes.
Okay. It seems I'm having slight connection problems. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you. Okay, thank you so much. So thanks for the kind introduction. I'd like to share a little bit my impressions that I had over the last couple of years founding a biotech startup out of an academic group. And the title of my talk is Molecular and Other Interactions. And actually, I'm going to focus on the other interactions more than the molecular ones. So the topic of my professional career was in the last decade and more was molecular interactions, but I noticed that it has a lot in common with human interactions. It's a little bit like a handshake, you could say. There's a bond that's being established for a certain amount of time and a stability, but it's also not forever. And I think it's both important to understand molecular interactions well for what we are doing, as well as human interactions. So the contents of this presentation is I'd like to tell you a little bit what the project is that we turned into a biotech company called Dynamic Biosensors and how I did get involved in that. And then I'd like to tell you a little bit about the fun part about building a startup. So I already used the term molecular interactions quite frequently in the last couple of minutes. So what is it that I'm referring to? It's about binding, it's about measuring affinities, kinetic rate constants of bonds, but it's also about structure-function relationships, so conformational changes in proteins, in DNA, maybe even multimerization events in biomolecules. And the starting point for this project was really that we developed a new technology that can measure all these parameters in one go that we termed switch sense. And that was kind of the basis for what we developed over the last couple of years. You can see here a slide that shows the product portfolio of Dynamic Biosensors because you immediately understand what we're doing. We are developing and selling machines, biosensor instruments to measure these molecular interactions. We started off with the DRX series of biosensors and are now in the process of launching and our Helix, our next generation line of biosensors to the market called the Helix instruments. There's also some surface chemistry that goes along with that. So there's biochips that are consumables for these instruments where the biomolecules are actually immobilized. And then there's coupling reagents and sample prep machines that also come into play. So it's a very wide spectrum of technologies. There's microfluidics, there's optics, there's surface chemistry, there's many different things that need to come together to make a good product. In terms of customers, we cater to the academic community, but also to pharma and biotech companies like the names you've probably heard of here in the top line, and they use the technology in their drug discovery process. I'm not going to talk about what technology used for in academics because that is very widespread. I'd just like to give you a very brief example. So when you think about the drug discovery process in a pharmaceutical company, you start off with a target identification. You try to screen very many molecules, usually either small molecules or antibodies, for a hit to your target that binds this target. And then there is a phase that I'd like to refer to as the biophysical characterization phase, where you try to learn as much as possible about the molecules of interest. So you study their on and off rates, conformational changes, and so on. And this is where the switch sense technology is being positioned before things move on to clinical trials and in vivo studies. Okay, when it comes to molecules, this is what we're particularly interested in: DNA, RNA binders, multispecific antibodies, and as I mentioned, also conformational changes that occur in proteins. Now that I've set the stage with the technology, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. There's not much to say. I studied physics in Austria at the TU Graz, and then I got into biophysics, into surface chemistry during my PhD. that was in nanobiotechnology, and this is also where the switch sense principle or electroswitchable DNA layers were at first discovered and studied. And then during my postdoc time and junior group leader time, I was maybe on a similar career path as Francesco at the time. I was also aiming to become a professor actually, but then my colleagues and I noticed that this principle works really well, and we did some application-oriented research, and that gave very promising results. So we decided that we would like to spin off and form a company. So we're now 4 co-founders in the company, covering biophysics, chemistry, engineering / software, and myself as well. So you might now wonder, many professors, or maybe more established professors, manage to do spin-off companies and pursue their academic career. It was quite obvious to me that this was not possible, because becoming, I think, the time when you are a junior group leader and you are at the verge of becoming a professor, you either have to dedicate 120% of your time to it or not, and the same goes for a startup company. So I maybe one of the tips that I can give is decide on one thing and then make the cut and just go for whatever you think is best for you at that point in time. And this is what I did. I have, of course, I have regrets in terms of the interesting things that happened scientifically in my group at that time, but I do not regret the decision, and I think it was definitely necessary to fully focus on the commercial aspect of things. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the biotech startup and what it takes to build it. First, maybe why at all would you like to build or start a biotech company? To me, there are 3 aspects that come together, and you can see them here. So first of all, of course, there's the scientific aspect. It's super interesting what we're working on. Every day we're getting different projects from either drug development or from super interesting academic collaborations. So the science is still there and is super interesting. And in many ways, we are, as a company, behaving as scientists. We're still writing research grants. We're collaborating with many people. So this aspect is still there for me. The other aspect, apart from science, and I'm mentioning this here as a sole indicator here, this is technology, and technology is different from science in that it needs to work. So if you can repeat an experiment 2 or 3 times, a scientific experiment, you will then gladly say that you have repeated it and that this is probably an important result and a sound result. In technology, if you repeat something 10 times and it only works 3 or 4 times, then people will not buy your product. So you have to make a transition to something that becomes very robust. And then there's another thing that's very important about the technology, because the technology needs to be commercially viable, meaning people need to pay money for that to actually get whatever you have produced. It must be needed. And this is something that is so obvious. But I think when you are in science, people tend to forget, over the excitement of what they're doing, that there needs to be a real commercial need for this technology. And so this is something that you have to think of very early on. And then there's a couple of, I call them real world aspects here that are quite interesting to me. So many of the decisions in the real world are obviously made by rational thinking and the decision-making process, but some of them are also irrational. So some of our instruments are being bought on a purely rational basis, and some are bought because people feel that they need to have this instrument in their lab now, which also makes things fun sometimes, because it's it's a very diverse decision-making process. Something that Francesco also mentioned already is the same goes here, is everything is about people, or a lot is about people. So you need to take care of them, and in the end, it's also about money. If you can pay for the people that are developing your project, then it's not going far. So here's a kind of a history, a short timeline of what had happened with dynamic biosensors. I don't want to go through this now in detail. Just what's important for you to appreciate here is that it's really long. So of course, in the beginning, in the first phase of development, the intensity was not very high. So there was like one PhD student working on things, and then maybe 2 or 3. So it developed very slowly in the beginning, and then picked up pace as we moved on and more money poured into the project. But the point is, from the actual invention of something in the early 2000s to making a viable commercial product, it takes a lot of time, and this is something that you need to be prepared for. What's also maybe interesting for you are little things like this here. So you will see, I mentioned it's all about people. So we are already doing user meetings, which I'm very happy about. So there's then 50, 70, 80 people coming together and just exchanging scientific experiences with the technology, and this makes everything a lot of fun. Yeah, this slide just focuses on the early days a little bit, so to shed light on the innovation part of the technology. So you could say that the first time we observed this was in 2002 maybe, but then it really took a long time just investigating the mechanism and then going into more application-oriented research and first convincing ourselves that this technology might actually work, and then developing the startup idea based on our own experiments, and then we decided to found the company. And the truth is that at that point in time, you don't know if things are going to work, and you really put things to the test when you start having first customers or users of the technology, because they will do things that you have not anticipated, and then so much more creativity and input comes into play that will overwhelm you and your team. But that also is extremely stimulating, and it gives you a lot of feedback that you can learn from, and then you start thinking about making better products for your customers. And that is to me, there is still a super exciting process, really. Okay, so this is my FNF slide, my fun and fulfillment slide. It's a little bit cheesy, but I personally, I take a lot of fulfillment in the fact that I think we're creating something useful, because in the end, it is used to create new scientific results that can do good for humanity, that can cure people. Not right now, because when people are using our instruments, it's usually so early in the development stage of a new drug that things come to market much later. But I still believe that it's a good cause. And then there's two other things that the truth is, you're not going to work every day and you're just thinking about the good of mankind, but you are just having fun doing things. And this is playing around with technologies, and in our case, getting a technology to work, from a scientific result, from a proof of concept, to something that works every day when you switch it on. And that's a huge challenge that I learned to appreciate much more now that we've gone through it and are still doing these things than before. And then last but not least, it's the teamwork that's real fun to me. So I think in Francesco's talk, you also saw that after your PhD, during your postdoc time, things become a little bit more, there's a little bit more solitude that develops, because you have to perform as an individual, and you have to make sure that everyone appreciates that it was your work. As a company, as a startup company, as a small team, you have one dedicated goal, and everyone works along these lines to achieve the same goal. And that is also, that creates a nice team spirit, and I think a very nice teamwork atmosphere that I enjoy a lot. So let me tell you a little bit more about all the people that are involved in these kind of projects. And here on the left side are you see people you would work with, and on the right side you see people you would work for. I think we don't have to talk about technology. You can all imagine these aspects, that there's still scientists involved. We have many biochemists, biophysicists working for us. Of course, there's engineers who develop instruments, production staff, and so on. Don't forget about software developers. Whatever you will do, you will have to invest, and we did that too late, I have to say, in a very good software development team, because a product nowadays is just nothing without a good software. And then there's something that I think when you get out of academia, you don't have the mindset for yet and the appreciation yet for, but this is crucially important, obviously, for a commercial, in a commercial setting. And this is a good sales team. So people who market your products and explain them. We don't really have, we're not trying to convince people. We're trying to work with people and explain our product and explain how it works and then see how people use it. But this is still, this is a very tedious process sometimes that people have to go through, and that takes a lot of effort and knowledge. Yeah. So in our sales team, for instance, we usually have PhD level scientists who then become work in a technical sales role, but this is super important. And then there's other people, obviously, in business administration, finances, and so on, and external consultants, advisors, lawyers that you will talk to. What's really interesting from a founder's perspective is the way that you scale up teamwork. So when you start just by yourself or just 2 or 3 people, then it's all about motivation, obviously, to do something. And then when you create a small team of 5 to 10, 15 people, maybe, it's all about team spirit, and everybody is doing everything. And later, there is a stage, and this is the kind of the stage that we're currently in as a company, where you're maybe not a huge company, but you have enough people so that it makes sense for different groups to specialize on something. And then you need people to communicate well with each other and still keep the team spirit that they had from before, and work together so that they can achieve a common goal. So that's, I think that's a very interesting phase that you might also go through, and where you will then need different skills from purely scientific or technological knowledge, yeah, to make a team work well. I don't want to talk about customers too much. We've seen what the technology is used for. I would just like, before I close, I would like to talk a little bit about investors, because I like these 2 quotes here. A startup company is a hypothesis to be tested with money. That is true in many respects. And then I also find this quote from Jean-Paul Getty, very funny: problems are best solved with other people's money. That is true when you are like myself. You don't have the financial resources to, just start your own company. So what the bottom line of these 2 quotes is, you essentially will engage in relations with investors. And you've seen there's 2 different types of investors. There are the business angels that have a more emotional, also rational, obviously, but maybe a more emotional, gut feeling like approach to things, that invest their own money, wealthy people. And then you have venture capitalists. These are then professionals who manage funds of other people's money, again, that they have to answer to and report to. So then things become very institutionalized, and processes become very strict in terms of reporting. The good thing about the relations to investors that you will have to answer to, of course, so you always have a boss, even if you make your own company, is that the conversations that you will have with them, they make you define your business case much better than if you would just write it down on a sheet of paper by your own, because they will challenge everything you say. And it's very much like, again, I'm referring to Francesco so often, but it's very much like in Francesco's case. You should not be distracted by an investor who thinks whatever you are saying is not worth investing in, or might even be a pile of crap. There might be others that believe in you, and so you have to try again, and you will get probably more rejections than that have success with them. But you are in the market of finding one in the beginning. So this is the good news about it. And here's, like, on the last slide, I would like to, this is probably all the wisdom that I can share with you. Please excuse again the cheesy icons here, but the animals kind of represent what I think are important personality traits. And this is, you have to be quick with your reactions. You have to have a very high level of self-motivation and drive in order to do something like this. At some point, you will have to become a team leader, which might mean that you will have to make decisions that are not being appreciated by everyone. But the worst thing for a team is that it lacks leadership. This is worse than having a leader that they don't like. So it is very important to kind of grow into that role as well. And then there's the owl represents, I like the big eyes here, is represents the ability to focus, because most of the things that are thrown at you will be so confusing and there will simply be too much for you to handle that you will just have to focus on the most important things. And that also means that you will neglect other things that are not so important to you at a given point in time. And that might mean that you are losing out on opportunities, or you might not pay attention to a certain personal situation the way you would like it to do, but you also only have a 24-hour day. So you have to focus on the essential things. And then down here, I think what you really need is resilience, a high tolerance for frustrations, because these also come along with all the successes that you also have. But usually you focus on the next problem at hand. And it's not, at least in our case, it's not a short trip. You will have to show some endurance to actually reach the finish line. And this requires sometimes to be patient, but it definitely requires persistence. So maybe the turtle is one of the best animals in on this slide. That's all I wanted to share with you for today. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Uli, for this nice presentation, and also the last slide. I think it is like a very well point to say. So there are several questions. One maybe you already answered, but maybe you want to add some more, is related to the investors. How difficult it is to convince the investor about your idea and your project that is worth to invest?
This is one of the most difficult things that you will have to face, and the answer is most likely you will not succeed the first time around. So what we did is the Munich area where we founded this company is luckily very active in terms of investment opportunities or investor conferences or things that you can go to. So you will try to tap into the network of your university and just go to these events and start with your first pitch decks and explain your ideas the first couple of times, and then refine the idea and explain it again and refine it again and explain it again until someone likes what you're telling them, and then you've got someone.
Thanks. I moved to the next one, and he's asking, how important is research and paper publishing for someone who would like a career in startup industry and engineer?
So when we hire people now, we also look for papers. Yeah, we look for people who have proven that they can conduct research in an efficient and goal-oriented way by themselves. We are not so strict with like what Francesco described. If you apply to the ERC, they will look for the one big paper that you have. For us, it can be different. We try to see more what the characteristics of people are, and some of them might publish many things and some of them might not publish many things because they might have been not super lucky with their group, but they are still a great match for our team. So unfortunately, the fluffy answer is, the more paper you have, the better it is for your CV. I think it's good, but it's not the only crucial thing that will count. No.
Okay, thanks a lot. And then the next one is, how do one get a salary when dedicating full time to a startup for a long time that takes to get a product?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Everyone has to eat after all. So I wouldn't worry too much about these things. So what we did also, we applied for startup grants at first, and they will give you a salary that is essentially the same as if you would do a PhD or a postdoc position. Obviously, you're missing out on getting a better salary at that time, and your colleagues might already be in an industry position that pays better, but you can still come by. And I would not recommend in our line of business that will probably not make you rich within 3 or 6 months. And that is an exaggeration. You will need a decent salary over the upcoming years, and every investor will also understand that, and they will see that you are being paid so that you're at least happy.
Sense. Last question, because then we have to move on, but this attendees is asking, when you look for investors and give shares in return, how much can you give away and how much should you keep to yourself?
Oh, this is the most difficult question ever, because it depends very much on your project and what the valuation of the company is, and that depends on the business case that you can make. If you can argue to people that in 5 years from now your company will be worth 100 million, and now you just need $1 million to invest, which is very unlikely. This is not the case. Then you can still keep most of your shares. However, in our cases, I have to say, and I think in most cases, you have to be prepared that you will be, even if in the first round you keep most of the shares, you will need so much money over the years that you will be diluted very significantly. But then there comes a point where investors also realize that they need to incentivize you, because they don't want you to be unhappy about where you are. They want you to be super motivated, and then things level off again. So unfortunately, it's a very difficult question to answer. Generally.
Yeah, I think that they have the idea. They got the idea. And then last, really quickly, they are keeping asking, but we have to stop at one point, is if you have any courses related to the economy part, so MBA or something on the commerce, or you ask suggestion or like support from an external partner.
Unfortunately, I did not have any business experience or skills before. We were lucky that we had this in the team by someone else, so that was being taken care of. I also think that with many things, and this should not sound too arrogant, but if you have a chemistry degree, if you have a physics degree or so, you can get into things if you want to, and you can learn them quickly if you need them. You just have to be open to it, and you have then to pay attention to it. So it is not, in my case, it was not a necessity, but if you don't have it, pair up with someone who has some experience. That will be helpful.
Okay, thanks a lot. As I said, still other question, but we are really running late, so I have to close here. But thanks for your talk and your time. Thanks.
My pleasure.
So let's move to the next and last speaker of the session, Nessa Carson, who started to work in pharmaceutical industry 3 years ago, and after training in organic chemistry. After working in small molecule synthesis for discovery chemistry, she moved to run the high throughput automation laboratory on behalf of Eli Lilly in the UK. She now recently moved to Syngenta near London, where she works on medium throughput reaction optimization and data management. So please, Nessa, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks very much. All right, are you able to see my slides?
Yes.
All right, brilliant. All right, well, sorry, do I have 15 minutes, 10 minutes?
10 minutes, 15 minutes maximum.
All right, I know we're a little behind. Okay, no problem. So this says careers in agrochemistry. It's really about careers in a big company, a big industrial company. That's where I've been for my whole professional life. So basically my timeline looks like this. I started, I was born in England, and in 2009, started my first degree at Oxford University. So this is an MChem degree, so it's a 4-year degree. These are really popular in the UK at the moment. So you spend your first 3 years doing mostly lectures, exams, that kind of thing. And then the 4th year is purely research. So there are 2 kind of main things that happened during my degree, other than the obviousness of getting a degree, that have informed my career now. And the first one I've mentioned on the slide, this is internships. So I wasn't allowed during my first 3 years, as is quite common in the UK, to do research during term time. So you can only do research during the summer for the first 3 years. So after my second year, I did an internship at Oxford because I knew the people there. So I just went to the labs and said, does anyone have a place for me in their lab? And that kind of taught me how to do research. This was my first research placement, so I didn't know anything. I just went to the labs, and the people I worked with were fantastic at teaching me how to do things. I loved it. So after my third year, I went to the States, to the University of Illinois, and I did another internship there. That was 3 months, and that taught me some new skills and taught me more about academia, about how things work over in the States compared with the UK. And yeah, it was very obvious from early on that I really wanted to do organic chemistry. The other thing that I was going to mention that was useful in my first degree was that, as Francesco said before, do your share in the community or field. So what I did was organised seminars, and it's like organising departmental seminars. This was actually for a historical science society. And basically we got in experts. It wasn't just chemistry, we had maths, physics, engineering, anything really that was scientifically based. But the one thing they had in common was that they're all hard research and cutting edge research lectures. So that was useful for two things. Partly, of course, the actual science or engineering or mathematics. I got to see perspectives into other fields and also see what was at the cutting edge of those fields. And the other reason, of course, is networking. I'm still in contact with a lot of the people that I met through running those seminars. And also it gave me experience in just something outside of the actual day-to-day lab science that showed me more about how the scientific community works. Okay, so after this, you know, clear I wanted to be an organic chemist, so I went on to the University of Illinois to do more research. So I did 3 projects. The only thing they had in common was transition metal catalysis. And as Ulrich was just saying, the research was, yeah, very important, of course, naturally. But actually the teamwork and the additional skills that I picked up were also, you know, I would say equally as important. I used to say nearly, but now I think equally as important. So I did this DOE optimization. That was a collaboration with, I think there were about 20 people, and they were all from the group, but we had different backgrounds. So we had computational chemists. So I learned about computational chemistry from them, and I learned about teamwork as a whole from working with all these different chemists on this project. So this became important. In 2017, I started applying for jobs. I decided to come back to the UK for that in broadly the pharmaceutical industry. All I knew was that I wanted to keep doing organic chemistry. So I started interviewing when I was still back over in the States, and of course had to come back here to do my on-site interviews. And I actually love interviews, to be honest. I thought it was great fun. I was expecting to have to do loads because I'd seen all the comments online which say I had to do, you know, hundreds of interviews and didn't get anything. That really, like, it didn't scare me, to be honest. I was just like, okay, well, this is what I have to do. I'm going to start doing it. Actually, for your first job, that's probably not going to be the case. Like, you may have quite a few interviews. You may have just a couple. That will depend on maybe where you are, maybe what your background is exactly. But you will get something. You will get something within not a huge period of time. So definitely just keep going with that. And I think one of the things that came up was this teamwork. I didn't get asked all these behavioral interview questions in interviews for my first job. That only came after then. But I did get asked sort of smaller things about, have you worked in a team? And I could very easily say, oh yeah, I've worked on this collaboration. I had to talk to these people. I had to organize this. I had to work directly with someone on such a thing. So that was fantastic. All right, so when I moved into pharma, this was over 3 years ago. So I started doing synthesis of compounds for the drug discovery efforts. This is probably, I would say, where the vast majority of organic chemists start in industry. You know synthesis, you start with synthesis. And it's great because you also get to do route design, of course, and you get to expand your skills quite significantly. So at this point then, it's kind of like there's a great deal of time management that's required. And that will be, for example, if I make a compound, it's a case of, should I purify it myself? Should I hand it off to an expert to purify it, which may take longer? But you know, they may be able to do it more effectively and free up some of my time, even though the final product takes longer to get out of the other end. And one thing I really liked doing at this point was I like going to conferences. So I went to lots of synthesis conferences. I also went to some other conferences to understand my place in the field a bit better. Some of these were data science, and some of these were things like artificial intelligence, which I'm interested in just in terms of chemistry generally. So I actually moved into high throughput automation completely by accident. Basically, this opportunity just came up, and I was asked whether I wanted to do it. And I'm guessing that was based on two things. That was based on the fact I'd been to these conferences and the fact that the person asking knew that I'd been to these conferences, which is networking, right? So I had someone who was able to give me an opportunity. I had never guessed that this opportunity would come up. But when I was asked, I said yes, yes, immediately. Of course, I want to go and do this. So I started working in high throughput. It's absolutely fantastic. It suits me really well. You get to work with instruments, work with data quite a lot. That's been important for me. So when I started in high throughput, then I took a course on coding just to sort of, just for my own interest and because I knew that it was bound to come in useful at some point. And actually now I use it every day. I write my own software for my own workflows, and I use that daily because it makes things so much faster for me. And to have tailored software that I have created for myself, for my own purposes, that works exactly the way I want it to, usually, that has been fantastic for me. So I'd say that's one of the most important things about being in a big company. You really get to shape your career direction. I did that for fun. I did that in my own time. Now it's a big part of my job. And as I say in this last section at Syngenta, then actually one of my jobs now is data management. And that wasn't really part of the advertised position. That was because now I have a small background in data. You know, it's all self-taught and that sort of thing, and just from my own experience. But because I have that, then, you know, I can choose to use that for the company if it suits both of us. And that's been the case for every part of my job, really. If I want to be able to move in a particular direction, for example, soon I think I'm going to want to start publishing for various reasons, for my own interest, really. So I'll be able to move in that direction as I want. If I didn't want to publish, which is not a requirement of many industry jobs, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, then, you know, no one's forcing me to do that, but I want to do that, so I'm taking my own initiative to move in that direction. Right, well, I had a couple of other slides, but to be honest, I think I can leave it on this one if that's a bit easier. I'd be absolutely thrilled to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nessa, for the introduction and overview of your, let's say, career as a young chemist. And there are several questions. We will take only few since we are already running a bit late. And one is, in a big company, how do you put yourself? Can you, like, if I see it correctly, can you express your ideas? Can you bring your point of view, or is like hidden in a big structure?
Yeah, okay, that was actually one of my big questions before I joined industry. To be honest, I didn't think I was going to like industry, but then I ended up applying for jobs and I was like, okay, I'll make most of it. Yeah, I thought there was going to be no freedom because that's what academics had told me. This is quite a common myth that academics will tell you, because I think they just want people to stay in academia sometimes. I mean, I know that's a minority of academics, but the myth really gets through, I think. Yeah, I have not found that to be true at all. So, for example, back when I was in pharma, then I had so much freedom. I mean, we were kind of setting up the lab. I was the only person in the lab, so I was able to run it all and manage it. Well, I was the only person working in the automation side of things, I should say. So I was able to kind of run it as I desired, really. I had an incredible amount of freedom. You know, people will come to you because they want a solution. They want something fixed, or they want something to start working, or they want new capabilities. And I guess in industry, there's an awareness that many of us are experts in different things. So if people come to me saying, I want such a capability, then it's up to me to figure out how on earth we're going to do that, whether it's even possible in the first place. So I found, yeah, freedom to be incredible. The best part of the job, really.
Nice to hear. And another question is related to the recruiting process. Was it difficult and maybe long, or was kind of straightforward?
Sorry, what was the first part of that? I didn't quite hear.
Yeah, sorry, maybe the microphone. How was the recruitment process? Like the application and the interviews and so on, went pretty smoothly, or was it a bit difficult?
Yeah, I actually love this part of it, to be honest. I know that sounds a bit weird, but whenever I'm meeting people applying for jobs in agrochemistry, jobs in pharma, which roughly work the same way, for the first time, then I always tell them this. I just really, really enjoy interviewing. And it's because you have a chance to travel around to get paid expenses for your traveling and talk about science, which is probably one of your favorite subjects. I mean, it's just great. I just love it. It can be fast, it can be slow. And that is probably nothing to do with you, the applicants. That is probably just how the company works or how it's working at that particular time. It can definitely be frustrating if you don't hear an answer for a long time and you think you have to move on, and then quite often they'll appear back from nowhere where you thought they'd just disappeared and be like, oh, hey, we want to offer you a job. Okay, I forgot you existed almost. So yeah, I think recruitment is like a strange time, I guess, but you're probably like ready for it, really ready for it, if you're a student or a postdoc going into this for the first time. That was one thing I found surprising. They're not going to ask probably very high level chemistry questions, which is sort of what I expected. It's probably going to be more checking that you have the broad basic knowledge, because they don't want someone who does just what you did in your PhD. They're going to want someone who can do you know, various aspects of chemistry for them. So it's probably going to be quite broad. It's probably not going to be intense, it's because they're looking for somebody well-rounded who can, you know, do a whole career for them, not one single thing.
Thanks a lot for your time and your presentation and your answers. I think that it's always good to have this feedback from for our audience. So let me thank once again all the speakers of this session. It was really a pleasure to have you here, and the attendees as well, and of course eYCN for organizing everything. And I'll invite you to attend the next webinar that is going to be in 20 minutes about ERC granting. So thank you once again, and have a nice afternoon to the speakers. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, everyone.